Welcome to Project Recovery. It's a podcast about
addiction, but
more importantly, it's about
recovery.
See, you're getting good at this, Matt.
Nice. That was good.
I'm Casey Scott, and my road to recovery began with Pinnacle Recovery Center. You know, and I've talked to a lot of people who are alumni of Pinnacle Recovery Center, and they're doing well. They do a fabulous job. So if you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. But Dr. Matt, I want to talk to you a little bit about, because I've got this friend.
A friend?
A friend. I've got a friend.
Sure.
And he's a highly educated man.
Really?
Yep, highly educated man, well versed in the way of the world. And but he's doing something that leads me to think there might be something wrong with him.
Uh-oh. What could it be?
So this man, and I told you he's highly educated.
Okay, right. Sort of an English gentleman, sort of.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah. And he's got a little bit of an obsession.
Okay. Got my interest.
I'm following him on Instagram. I'm following him on Facebook.
Right.
And it usually happens about once a week. He takes this little figurine out. And he takes photos of it in preparation for...
Is it just a figurine, or does it have more significance, do you think?
Well, it's okay. I mean, I didn't want to put this guy on blast, but it's a gnome.
It's a gnome, okay.
It's a gnome, and it's wearing the Real colors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes he will light a football or a soccer ball.
English gentleman, football.
Yeah. That's why I was doing that, because like I said, this guy's educated.
Yeah, in the ways of the world.
Why do you do this?
Me?
Yeah, that's you.
You knew that was me?
Yeah. I'm thinking, man, this guy's got more degrees and he knows what to do with.
Yeah.
Do you think this helps the team?
I feel like it's a healthy outlet.
So tell everybody what you do.
Okay. So so I wandered into the RSL team store, as I do occasionally, and they had their RSL garden gnomes on sale. And I thought, I'll buy a garden gnome.
Would you have bought it if it wasn't on sale?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean...
Because you're educated.
Yeah, I wanted to get a good deal, right?
Yeah.
So I got a good deal, and I thought, well, what am I going to do with this garden gnome? And it kind of rode around in my car for a while, and I thought maybe it could bring good luck to the team. And I thought, how can I do that? So every week I pose the garden gnome in various scenarios that have to do with the game coming up, and I wish the team good luck.
How's that working?
It's great. Fantastic. We're doing really well. His name is Nicky the Gnome. You can follow.
Everybody loves alliteration.
Right, exactly. And he's kind of like Nick Ramondo's little gnome buddy.
Okay.
And Nick Ramondo, just so you know, has appreciated several of the pictures and liked them himself.
All right.
Or he's just trying to keep tabs on somebody that seems like a stalker. I can't tell what
Maybe
his
both.
plan is. Yeah.
But Nick, if you're listening...
Can I be perfectly honest, though, with people?
Yeah.
It started to become kind of stressful because I do it every single week. And to be honest, last weekend I was like, I don't know what to do. Like trying to come up with new, interesting places. I've done it here at the KSL studios. You've posed with Nicky the Gnome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and John Smith. And so if anybody has any good suggestions, any RSL fans out there of places they'd like to see Nicky appear on game day on Instagram, just let us know.
Well, we started this podcast as a resource for people, in addiction and in recovery. And a lot of people have been reaching out to us on Facebook, Instagram, KSLTV.com. And that's a resource that we like to use and utilize more. So you can follow you on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram. And, of course, we've got the Project Recovery webpage and Facebook page and Instagram.
Yeah.
And one guy reached out to me. And the topic he's bringing to us is a little heavy. Now, a lot of times, the topic is heavy.
Right. I would say every week. It's pretty serious.
Not every week are you going to have somebody trying to shoot for someone's jugular.
Not every week.
Like Yvonne last week.
Right. I know.
You said that was the one time you've ever seen me.
I have never seen you with your mouth open and a lack of words. And I looked over at you, and you were just...
I was like, whoa.
Wow. But that was great because she was being so authentic, and she shared her real story, and I think that's what touches all of us, right, is when a person can come in and talk about serious things, and that's why I'm excited to have our guests on today. It is a heavy subject, and I'll let you get to that, but because it's a heavy subject, over the years, it has been avoided people have avoided talking about it. There hasn't been enough education and information out there, but it is an issue that ends up touching all of our lives. Obviously, in my profession as a psychologist, it touches me professionally, but it has touched my life personally. And I'm grateful that they're willing to come on and talk about this subject.
And today we're talking about suicide. A lot of people have said, hey, your podcast usually only celebrates people's successes. And those are people coming out here like Yvonne, like Court McGee, to talk about their story and what they're doing now. Right. And I remember when I was in rehab, the therapist sat me down and says, hey, listen, the story you have right now ends two ways. It either ends with your death or with your success. And you've got to be able to pick which side of the road you're going to go with. And,
And you've told me that before. That really made an impact on you, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Had anybody ever really spoken to you that way, that plainly about this before, about addiction?
I mean, I think, people will tell you that, but it becomes white noise when you're in your addictive brain.
Okay.
It's like, you're just trying to scare me.
Right.
But me looking to where I was and where I've been, it was pretty evident, that something had to change, and it had to come from within me. And so Jon Gosset reached out to us, and that's who was our guest today, and he's brought his beautiful wife here. And you were telling me a little bit about it, but how has suicide impacted your life, and what made you want to come on the podcast and talk about it?
Well, it was back in 2014. We live in Tooele, and my son was a wrestler at the high school, and he had been a wrestler for 3 years, I think, and he lost one of his teammates. That we'd traveled all these wrestling tournaments all over the state, and we'd gone to state 3 years in a row. And the week after state, one of his teammates took his life. And we happened to be I'm a contractor, so we had happened to be in St. George at the Parade of Homes the following week. And he had decided to stay. So first thing you think of as a parent is, what's he going to do while we're out of town?
Party.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so we had said, okay, well, we'll have people check in on you, and you have to go to school. So he had gone to school, I think that was Friday morning, and my daughter had pulled up a post that said that his teammate had passed away by suicide. And we called to check on him. He was in the lunchroom. Coach had come and pulled all the team out.
Because that hits hard.
It does.
I mean, they are a family. As much as your real family is tasked with raising you, also who you surround yourself with, whether it's sports, dancing, or whatever.
In adolescence, you create a strong bond, and that bond's very important to an adolescent's development. And so when another adolescent takes their life, it has a really strong effect on everybody that person was connected with, and even just people that go to the same school feel a bond, even if they're not on the same team.
And that's why you have to be really careful. So when you lose somebody in a school, that's why the team of counselors goes out and does that crisis intervention,
right.
Talks to those kids, because a lot of the kids, that's a heavy thing to bear if they think they missed something or they didn't notice something. Even for the coach, kind of came out of the blue. And coach had said, hey, want to talk to you guys about something. And he did a great job, just a stud. He's a good guy. And we decided at my son's request that we didn't come home because he was going to hang out at coach's house that evening. And the next day, being Saturday, we had reservations at Anasazi. We were going to go in and have some dinner. And my best friend called me. I didn't answer the call. Tracy's like, well, that's rude. You didn't answer. And I said, I wouldn't have been able to hear because there's so much background noise. I said, I'll just call him when we leave. And so I called him back as we left, and he didn't answer. So I shot him a text, what's up, big guy? And he responded in just a very direct manner and let me know that his son had taken his life. And there was something about having two back-to-back. So that's that week. And then the next week, we're at the Catholic.
These are two separate boys.
Two separate boys, no connection. Mm-hmm. One was 17, 18?
It was his senior year.
Senior year. And then the other boy was 27?
Yeah,
20.
Married, 3 kids.
married, 3 kids. And so, I mean, there was no connection between the two other than they both lived in Tooele. And it was tough to hear that. I mean, hearing one was tough enough. Saturday, we were in kind of just a bad spot all day thinking this poor family. Then Saturday, getting that message from my best friend and realizing he's in that same boat. And then the following week, we're at the Catholic Church on one day for a funeral and at the LDS Church the next day for a funeral. Wow. Just boom, boom.
Now, I mean, I feel bad asking this, but were the suicides a result of addiction, or do you know why they chose to take their lives?
Do you know, well, for my best friend's son, for instance, he worked shift work, and he started out taking energy drinks to do the night shift and then taking sleeping pills to do the day shift. He got in a car accident, and the car accident, he was prescribed some pain pills. And the pain pills must have felt good to him, and so he was taking those. And there was one point in time he said to his family, "I'm all right, but if you ever see me do heroin, know that there's a problem." And eventually the pain pills led to heroin because it was cheaper and easier to get. And that kind of was a downfall, I think, for him. And it became – he actually did go to a couple of recovery centers.
He went to 3 rehabs.
3 rehabs trying to overcome this and just couldn't kick it. And you know, that's a tough thing is – and I've heard you say it before – you've got to be the one that wants it.
Yeah.
You can go to recovery for a wife, and you can go to recovery for whoever.
Yeah.
But until you've hit your rock bottom, and everybody's rock bottom's a different place, and you might think they've hit their rock bottom and they've really got a ways to go still. So, you know, it's a tough thing to watch. And, you know, it's not just kids that you have to worry about, and it's adults. It's, you know what, believe it or not, it's seniors. You know, seniors might be taking pain pills for their.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we're finding. While a person may end in what we consider harder street drugs, a lot of the stories that we've been hearing over the months we've been doing this start with people who, come by it honestly, so to speak, through a prescription. Mm-hmm. They've been in an accident, they've had a surgery, something has happened, and that happens to be a drug that they really click with and gets a hold of them quickly. As you were talking about your friend's son, the adult, I was curious if you had just an estimate of how long was that process for him from about, the time he might have started using the opiates to
the 3 rehabs.
The 3
It
rehabs.
was like 4 or 5 years.
Okay, so it was over a space of 4 or 5 years.
We could be wrong, but it was it wasn't a short period of time. It didn't progress quickly like that. It drug on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, I know that we've had some feedback, people who listen to this show or friends and family members of our audience are currently struggling with the pills, the opiates, and how that's affecting their lives right now. And so I think one message is that's the time to try to find your motivation to go in and get help before it continues on into other things. And heroin seems to be the next substance that's common.
You're listening to Project Recovery. More of Jon's story coming up.
We talk about the opiate problem, and I know the ballpark. We're in the number of like 44,000 a year that die because of opiates. And you're right in that same ballpark with suicide. The interesting thing to me is the way that the way that the records go down. If you die by an overdose and you don't leave a note, it's going to go down as an accidental overdose. You have to leave a note for it to be a suicide. And we've seen, I'm sure a lot of those deaths were a suicide, but they go down, they're recorded differently. But in one area where we've worked quite a bit is with our veterans. We're losing 22 a day. So many of those are due to addiction as well. And so, I mean, it runs from young kids all the way up. And not talking about suicide, interesting statistic is in Utah, the youngest we've lost to suicide is age 5.
Whoa.
The oldest that in the years that we've been doing it, 95.
95.
So 5 to 95. And you think, I mean, you remember being 5?
No.
The only thing I remember was we were living in L.A. and I got nap time at school.
I want nap time now.
Yeah.
I do remember nap time. Those were good days.
Oh, it was the best. They don't let them have it anymore.
Unfortunately, those young elementary school age suicides are very rare, but they do happen, and the problem. One of the issues with trying to understand, and you could speak to this from the work you do, but trying to understand and work in the area of suicide is there's so many different factors that can bring a person to a suicidal moment. Yeah. And sometimes those factors can be observed and seen. So others might be reaching out and trying to provide support. The person, him or herself, may be verbalizing a need for help. But so often those things are very private and not observable. And so back to the peer groups of adolescents when a suicide happens, family members of somebody who passes away, there's often this sense of guilt. And so having an open conversation, educating people in this process is extremely beneficial to helping people get support, so hopefully avoiding suicide, but also helping provide support to friends and family and community when somebody does take their life.
When that high school student chose to take his life, do you know the reasons why?
I can't speak for the boy. I know that he came from a great family. I love his parents to death, some of the sweetest people you'll ever meet. I don't think I could be at liberty to say anything on that, but
what was the
because
effect?
I wouldn't want to get it wrong. I wouldn't want to.
What was the effect on the high school?
Well, I'll tell you, it was tough because he was popular. He was a football player. He was a wrestler. Great kid, great grades.
And that's a story you seem to hear quite often. With that is that, he seemed to have everything going. I mean, it's similar to me and my own addiction. I mean, it seemed to have everything going. Why would he do something like this?
Yeah. It's important to understand, especially for the listener who's trying to comprehend what we're talking about today, is that those factors of success at any age, whether you're an older person or an adolescent, those factors of success don't insulate a person from the issues that may bring one to a suicidal moment.
I was going to say, suicide doesn't have a certain group, a certain race, a certain religion. It doesn't. It hits everybody. There are things that can increase your suicide risk. Sure. If you lose a family member, that'll increase the risk of everybody else. For instance,
and that's same for peers, right? That's why we're so sensitive to trying to support kids within a school or in a community, because the statistic is that kids become at higher risk if somebody in their immediate peer group also, or immediate as in like their school. Yeah,
now in schools now versus when we were kids, I've got a friend, Dr. Greg Hudnall, who runs Hope for Utah, the Hope Squads in schools. Those are in every junior high, every high school.
My daughter's in the Hope Squad.
Yeah, and so the Hope Squad is, well, you can probably tell it better, but what does the Hope Squad do?
The Hope Squad, because I asked my daughter, she goes, "Dad, I made the Hope Squad." I went, "Cool, what's the Hope Squad?"
Yeah.
And she goes, "Well, Dad, we just go around and we talk to people and we see how they're doing. If we're out at recess and there's a kid sitting over there on the bench and doesn't look like they're having any fun, we go over there and say, 'Hey, what's going on? Why don't you come in here and be included with us and play games and jump on the monkey bars?' And if we go to lunch and there's somebody sitting at a table all by themselves and they've been doing that for a long amount of time, we try to go and just reach out to them."
Yeah, the idea is a peer-to-peer connection. And so often adults, for years since we were kids, you had counselors in schools and things like that. But it's really when you're an older child and an adolescent, that peer-to-peer connection is what's really meaningful to you. And so the Hope Squad is trying to utilize a natural occurring phenomenon, which is your friends are more important than the adults around you, and create connection. And having a connection can reduce risk for suicide, feeling emotionally connected with other people, feeling an important part of a relationship. It certainly doesn't eliminate risk, but it decreases risk.
Well, and you said something that kind of brought a thought to mind. That's what people look for. They want that connection. So many times you'll hear people say, oh, nobody'd notice if I was gone. Nobody would care. It wouldn't make a difference, right? My family'd be better off without me. So with that being said, people tend to feel invisible, like they're not noticed. And that's when you need to worry. So there was, I don't know if you guys have heard of Kevin Hines. So
I'm not familiar.
Kevin Hines was one of the, well, how should I word this? San Francisco, many people go to the Golden Gate Bridge to take their life. They jump from the Golden Gate Bridge. We've lost over 2,000 people to jumping from the Golden Gate Bridge. Only a handful have lived.
I think I've seen his video on Facebook.
Yeah, he's
now
a stud.
that you mention that, I do.
He's a
realize who you're
stud,
talking
but
about,
he's one of 5 that can walk. And he woke up that morning. He suffers with being bipolar, and he had said he just knew that was he was hearing these voices in his head saying, you need to do this, and so he got up, told his dad he loved him, left on the bus, and he kept thinking if somebody would just notice me, and so he's riding on the bus to the Golden Gate Bridge, and the only 2 people that even noticed him were 2 old guys that were sitting on a bus seat in front of him. And the one guy leaned over the other guy, and he's like, what the hell's his problem? Because he's back there crying, tears streaming down his face. When he gets to the Golden Gate Bridge, he gets out of the bus. And there's that walking path along the Golden Gate Bridge from one end to the other. And he starts walking across it. And he had told himself, we all make these deals with ourselves. But
You do it in addiction all the time.
yeah, and so he says, hey, I'm going to walk across this bridge. If anybody notices the pain that I'm going through, I'm not going to jump. So he walks across the bridge. Nobody notices. No, he's tears streaming down his face. He's obviously in crisis. Nobody says anything to him. Everybody kind of doesn't want to open that, can of worms or whatever. But he walks across the bridge, and as he's walking back, he hears this voice, and I think it was a little German lady that says, excuse me. He turns around thinking that was his answer, and she goes, would you mind taking my picture? And so he took her camera, took her picture, handed it back, and he threw himself over the thing. He fell 25 stories doing about 75 miles an hour, hit the water in like 4 or 7 seconds. I mean, it was pretty quick. And he hit that water because he didn't have that connection. He felt he was invisible. His pain wasn't being noticed by anybody. And so leading back to the Hope Squad thing, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to instill in kids to be empathetic and be watching, because signs are there. You do hear people say there were no signs, and that obviously is a possibility. But for the most, statistically speaking, most people convey their intent in the week prior. And if we're all watching and we're all being vigilant and trying to notice it, hopefully we're going to save a life.
Now, there seems to be a lot of similarities in the stigma around addiction as in suicide.
I would agree with that, sure.
Where it's something...
And kind of, just mental health in general.
Yeah, where a lot of people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about their addiction. Their family members don't want to talk about it because they don't want to bring the attention onto the family. In obituaries, you want to celebrate this person's life, but they don't ever say how, that they took their lives usually, because...
They don't usually, because there's a stigma with that.
And you wonder if it would save people's lives by people going, hey, this is a real problem.
Yeah.
And just like addiction, we've got to start a conversation. If we don't open up a conversation, when I was in Pinnacle Recovery Center, they said addiction, and that loves to live in the dark. When you shine a light on it, it shrinks and goes away. But if you just keep it silent and keep it secret, then it just grows and grows.
Yeah. That's absolutely the truth. And one of the things I think back to my own childhood and adolescence and growing up, and we're similar experiences growing up here in Utah. And, I don't recall a Hope Squad or anything like that being available. And in fact, what's interesting is, as a psychologist, I have this experience quite often where people will say, I didn't realize anybody else thought that way, or I didn't realize anybody else felt that way when they have a conversation with me, or we've had some of our listeners say similar things like, I didn't know that was common, whatever the it happens to be.
That's what I loved about the 12-step, is all of a sudden I was in a room of 200 people.
That got you.
That got
right?
me.
Yeah.
That I thought I was just alone.
Right. And so this conversation, bringing it to the public, suicide is a very complicated issue because there's so many different reasons or factors that might influence somebody to have a suicidal moment. But the reality is, if people from a young age can start to realize, I have these thoughts and feelings, they're kind of scary and dangerous, it's okay for me to reach out and talk to somebody and get some help. If other people realize it's okay to ask somebody, how are you doing? That's not a bad thing. That's not intrusive. I mean, I've walked across the Golden Gate Bridge, and you're in a public place like that. It's hard to know if it's okay to reach out and say something to somebody. But when you learn how to do it, you see somebody who's in distress, and you just ask them, "Are you okay?" You never know what positive impact that might make. And if we don't learn that as kids, because I certainly didn't learn that growing up.
No,
like, I don't think I would have, sadly, said much to somebody unless they were really a close friend. And even then, the way guys are kind of socialized, we don't really talk about our feelings. You might slug your friend in the shoulder and tell him to, toughen up, and that's not the right approach. And so the work that you guys are doing is so valuable, and it's the peer-to-peer, it's person-to-person. I think people like my profession, therapists, we have a role to play, of course, but the real power is when it becomes normalized and common in the community for people to support each other and have this conversation and realize, hey, other people have these thoughts too. It doesn't make me weird. It doesn't make me crazy.
But I think
there's help for me out there.
Everybody thinks that it's such a taboo topic.
Right.
I'm wondering, as a therapist, me talking to my own kids, bringing it up, because I'm not saying I've been suicidal, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've never thought, would this place be better without me? If I was going to do it, how would I do it? Maybe I am, but
in fact, that very thought that you bring up right there, and you guys can probably speak to this also, is such a common theme. But most people won't admit to it. I'll admit to it right now. I've had this thought before. I think most people have. Yeah. And that is, in a moment of desperation, you have some thought that's sort of like this. I think everybody would be better off without me.
I think everybody's thought
that. And that's right. And that's but that's hard to talk about. And when you start that conversation, other people go, yeah, I felt like that too.
Who would show up at my funeral?
Suicide? People will say, well, I've never been suicidal. But it's important to start talking about the things, the thoughts and the feelings that are associated. Feelings of hopelessness, desperation, isolation. Those sorts of thoughts and feelings, I think anyone who's honest can relate to. And those are associated with sometimes becoming suicidal.